Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. Today we're going to be doing a full line stencil video tutorial where we show you how you can use these wonderful, fabulous stencils to create designs that you wouldn't be able to freehand on your own. There's a lot of designs, specifically feathers, that I would never be able to do without a line to follow, and these give you that. So I've got 4 designs like really down. You can see all those in our Intro to Free Motion Quilting course that you can take for free. But beyond that, there are hundreds of stencils that you can get, both from Full Line Stencil and other manufacturers that help you develop your quilting and be able to maybe eventually do this on your own without a stencil, or to just be able to follow a line and have a consistent repeat that goes across. So in order to do this, you're going to need a Pounce pad. This is a chalk applicator. What you do is you fill it up from here. We have a video that shows you exactly how to do this, but you're going to take the top off, you're going to fill it with chalk, and then you're going to bang it really hard against a hard surface 50 times. And then if it's the first time filling it up, you're going to repeat that a second 50 times. Again, if you've never done this before, we have a video tutorial that shows you exactly how to do it, as well as how to mark your quilts for the home sewing machine and the long arm, because it's a little bit different process depending on what you're quilting on. You're also going to need a stencil. This one is the Heart Border Stencil from Full Line Stencil, and I actually have quilted a center already. This is the I Love It stencil that's in the center. We have a video tutorial that shows you how to do that separately if you want to watch that. But I've done this before when I'm quilting, where if I want it to be a little bit custom, I'll do the center as one big all over design. So that's what I've emulated here in our sample, is we have one big all over heart. And then we're going to treat the border a little bit separately. This fits perfectly inside a 4-inch border, which is a really common border size. And so I'm going to show you how to mark it on your quilt top so that it will work for your purposes here today. And I figured the best way to do that was to actually create a center and a corner so you guys could see kind of how that works. What makes these stencils different than like the plastic ones you get at the store is, one, they're super flexible. They're much more forgiving. You're not going to like beat them up as much, and you can iron them flat if they ever get wrinkled or a crease in them or anything. And also, this is like a screen printing material. So like if you screen printed a t-shirt, you would push ink through the sort of screen print part of it, and that's how you get ink on it. This works in a really similar way, where what we're doing is we're pushing chalk through the line. So instead of having all those dotted lines to follow where you can get off and get confused, this one you have a nice clear line to follow. I'm going to be using the Ultimate White today. This one disappears with a hot iron. The pink and the blue do not do that. You're going to need to wipe those away with like a wet washcloth or something, or just throw it in the wash and it'll go away. But this one, for the purposes of demonstration, and since I have a really bold background, I'm going to be able to see it really well. So we're going to talk a little bit about marking. We have a whole video that shows you how to mark with these stencils, but this one's a little different because obviously we have a straight line design, but we need to turn a corner. So we're going to talk about that. So one of the first things I did when I was figuring this out and how I wanted to do this, both as a demonstration and to make it fit well in the design, was to measure it. And it is about 12 inches from the edge of the heart to the edge of the heart. And you're going to see these registration marks. Essentially, when you repeat it, we're going to line this mark up with the line that we put on the side here. And that will allow, this line will essentially connect from here to the next heart system. So if you have a quilt that is 12 inches or somewhere thereabouts, like a 12-inch block, that's a really common block size, that's great. You can just line it up. So like for this top part, I cut this so that it's going to be exactly 12 inches. So for that, I can come up here and I can line it up. And I have, you can see my line that I quilted to represent kind of the end of my quilt center. And I can see that through, and it's a little bit easier to tell on like an actual quilt. But I'm just kind of lining it up so that my swoops are about an equal distance above that line. And then I'm lining up this registration mark here. It's like a little target so that it's even with my corner. So you can see this fits really well in between here because we've got 12 inches from the side to where this piece ends here. So that's perfect. That fits really well in a 12-inch block. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that. And you can see it's really dark where I started, and then it gets a little lighter out here, but I can still see that just fine. Now I'm going to mark the corner last because I want to get everything lined up on the rest of it first. So there's two ways we can do this. If you have, like in this case, I've got 16 inches from here to here. So each one of these hearts takes up about 4 inches. So if I line it up here and then I move my registration mark over, I'm going to be able to fit 4 hearts in this. So if you have anything that's a multiple of 4, then that's just what you're going to do. You're going to line it up just like we did before and get it so that, you know, you've got your pieces lined up just like you did before, and just go for it. If not, if you don't have that, what you're going to do is we're going to measure our center, which I'm going to eyeball here. And you're going to roughly put the center of your piece there. And then what you can do is we're going to be left with a little bit of space here. So you can just kind of do like your own little swirly and to connect to your corner piece, and just kind of free motion quilt right in here to fill that in a little bit. But if most quilts, a vast majority of them are built on that 4-inch increment because that's a really common size for that 12-inch quilt block. And so even if you're adding like a 2-inch border on top of that, it's still going to add, if you have 2 inches on both sides, it's still going to add 4. So, you know, you might have something that's like 52 inches instead of 48, but you're still going to fit real nicely and be able to fit 1 extra little heart in. So that's what I'm going to do here. Get everything nice and lined up. So again, you can see real clearly where I've stitched that line. That'll be easier to tell on your quilt too, because you will have the block will be ending here. So I'm going to get this lined up again. And again, I'm trying to kind of arrange it so that it's in the middle, so that it's nice and even going across everything here. And I'm seeing where this is ending. And I can tell if I come up here, it's going too far over. So I got to move it over a little bit here. So that way, when it comes up, I've got a little bit of space between where this edge is here and where my heart begins. So that's looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and mark that. And I'm not going to mark in here because we're going to hit that later. And I want that to be nice and free and clear for now. We're going to do that corner last. All right, so now we're going to pick this up. And I went over that a couple more times on that back end, so that's pretty good. And I can still see my little registration mark here. So that's where I'm going to connect. I put my finger on top of the registration mark and I move it until it is on top. And when you do that, you can see that my line is connecting really well to right where this heart ends. So that's going to continue on really well. And you can see it fits really well in there because I have, again, 16 inches from this corner to this corner. So as long as your quilt is on 4 inches, it's going to fill in really nicely. But again, if you center that as well, like say it's not exactly 4 inches, if you have an extra inch on either side, as long as it's centered, it's still going to look really nice. And you can either leave a gap there, just let it be open, or you can do a little something freehand to fill that in. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this section next. All right, that connected beautifully. So I'm going to be able to just like quilt straight through here. All right, so now we've got to get something in the corner here. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take, I think this one, because what I can do is I can connect this bottom to our heart here. And I can kind of just put this in the corner. and let it fill in kind of like that. And I can see this is really dark, so I can see that I haven't overlapped there. So that's something you kind of want to pay attention to. But I'm pretty close to where my heart is on this side. So I'm just going to move it up a little bit and into that corner a little more to give myself a little bit more space in between and make sure that's on a nice 45-degree angle. Now I'm going to mark this. And again, I am just marking where this heart is in the corner. All right, now you can see that this doesn't connect perfectly. Like this line is coming up here to the bottom instead of here. So if you want, you can take like a friction gel pen that's going to go away with heat, and you can actually physically mark from here to the next heart, and do the same thing right here. We can connect this way as well. I think I'm actually going to do that just because it'll give me a really nice line to follow, and that way you guys can see it here at home. But if I were doing this not on camera, I probably would not do that. I would just eyeball it coming from here into here, and then eventually from there into the next one. All right, so when you're deciding where to mark, you want to kind of see how it's worked before. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in and swoop, and we're going to do a heart up to here, and then we're going to come down to our bottom of our heart here, come up to the center, and then connect here again, and then we're going to continue to finish this heart that we started on, and then we're going to be able to move on to the next one. So you're always coming in and going out of the same heart. So from here, I want to make sure that I can follow that path, and I'm just giving myself a swoop to go over to there, and then I'm going to connect it here as well. So now I've just given myself my in over here and my back out, and if you want, you can kind of erase that a little bit, so that way you're not as tempted to follow it when you're going on there. So that's the path we're going to follow. If you have not done free motion quilting before, I highly suggest you take our Intro to Free Motion Quilting course. It really goes over all of this, but essentially you can do this on the long arm or the home sewing machine. But if you are on either a long arm that does not have a stitch regulator, or you're working on your home sewing machine, then you are the stitch regulator with how fast you are moving the quilt or your machine in relation to how fast your machine is going. So that takes a little bit to figure out. I always move my machine down to the medium speed regulation because I have a machine where I can go either slow, medium, or fast. And I like to use it when I'm sewing with kids and when I'm doing free motion quilting, because then I can do pedal to the metal without worrying that I'm going to be going way too fast. But I do always start off going kind of slow until I have got the pattern I feel like down, and then we can go from there. Now, one bonus of doing this as a border instead of in the center is you're not just going back and forth up and down, because you can turn the quilt. I can start off here and I can quilt all the way through, and once I get to here I can pause, or probably right here is where I would do it, because it's always good to stop in the center of a heart because you have a nice point there. And then I can completely pause, turn the quilt, and do the border this way. So it is a little bit easier to manage, especially if you have a small throat on your sewing machine. But this is going to be a fun one. I can't wait to see how this turns out. So when you get started for motion quilting, you want to listen as much as you look, because if you listen to this machine, you can hear that it's running very steady. And I'm moving my machine at a very steady pace too. That's what creates even stitches. Now you might find that you want to speed up. And if you speed up your sewing machine, that just means that you also need to speed up how fast you're moving the fabric as well. But for this first one, I'm going to go nice and slow. You can see I came to that connection, and then I'm doing this entire heart first. And don't worry so much about staying perfectly on the line. What matters is that you have a nice curve for your heart, and that you have a nice point for the bottom and the top of it, because the lines are going to go away. Now right here, I do want to hit the point that I came in at, because this is where the hearts are going to cross, and it's going to be kind of obvious if I don't hit it. So I do want to pay attention there. That one does matter. All right, I feel like I kind of have got the hang of this. So I'm speeding up not just my machine, but also how fast I'm moving the fabric, so that way my stitches can remain nice and even. And I'm being very careful not to scrape my hands across the chalk, because that is going to cause it to have a problem and get wiped off. Now I'm going to pause here because I don't have control of this anymore. I need to flatten everything out. I have a camera right here, and so it's getting caught on my tripod. That is not a problem you guys are going to have at home. But typically I would want to stop either at a point or the bottom of my heart or the top. Those are both really good spots to stop, because it's not going to be obvious if you like have a hiccup with it being straight otherwise. So what I like to do when I have to get going again is get it up to speed first and then go. And that is very helpful. Now when I'm working on my long arm, I have a stitch regulator, so I don't have to worry about that as much. You can see that I was pretty far off of where that line was. When you're working on a home sewing machine, it's always a little challenging because you just don't have the same visibility as you do if you're working on a long arm or a machine that is like a sit down that's meant for quilting that's really big. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of fudge it here. I'm going to come in, and then I'm going to, instead of trying to go up and hit that line, I just made a heart loop from there, and it actually turned out looking pretty good. And once I remove the chalk, no one's going to know that I was off, which is fine. All right, so now we're going to try to make it all the way to the center of that heart before I reposition my hands. So here we are coming up to where the overlap happens, and you can see it's just hard to see because I got a whole free motion quilting foot in the way. But here we are, we're in the center. So now is a good time to move your hands, because you can only quilt with what's in between your hands. And so you want to make sure that you're kind of holding them on either side here. And typically you're going to have more fabric off to the side here with your quilt sandwich, so you will have something to hang on to here. Whereas with the sample, I'm just working with a ½ yard of fabric. And so it is, I don't have too much to hang on to here on this side here. But it's enough to get the hang of it. All right, so we're gonna come in, out. And again, I'm looking more to hit where I made that turn and worrying less about where it was supposed to be, so that I can have a nice looking heart at the top there. All right, now here's that section that I drew in my connection to get to my corner. So that way I've just got a line to follow. I don't have to think about it. Anytime you can eliminate something you have to think about when you're quilting, that's kind of nice, because you can kind of just get in the zone and go. Okay, so I'm at my good stopping point. I'm now at my center of my heart. So this is the point where I get to do something I don't normally get to do when I'm quilting on my home sewing machine, and that's turn the entire quilt, because I'm going to start coming down here to get the other side of that border. So it's going to be a little bit different process, at least for this part here, because I'm kind of quilting at a little bit different angle than I'm used to, but then it will feel familiar once I've fully made the turn and I'm quilting here. Another tip to make sure that you have really nice points and not giant stitches coming out of them is to just kind of pause in place whenever you're at a point. So whether it's the bottom of a heart or the top of it when you're in the center, just stitch in place a couple times, and that'll be really helpful and making sure you have really nice looking points. The heart is kind of the precursor to the feather, so once you feel like you have hearts down pretty well, it may mean you're ready for a feather. Hit that spot again. Let's come out. This is honestly the hardest part on a home sewing machine, is getting this big swoop to be nice and smooth. It's a lot easier on a long arm because you can get those swoops a little easier. But to be able to do that all in one fluid motion on a home sewing machine, when you don't have as much throat space, the throat, by the way, is this section in here, that's a lot harder to do. All right, I was a little off here, so again, we're going to come in to where I actually stitched and then create our heart. Kind of freewheel it a little bit there. So remember, those lines are going away. No one's going to know I was off a little bit, except all of you watching at home. Stop again and reposition those hands. This one was pretty on to where we're supposed to be, so I can follow the line out there. That one was a little bunchy, mostly because I didn't have anything to hang on to. And again, that's not something you're going to have to worry about as long as you follow the instructions to have about 5 inches on either side of your quilt sandwich. You will have plenty of batting and backing to hang on to, and it won't be so wobbly for you. While my iron heats up, we're going to take just a second to take a look at this. First of all, this was my first pass going over the stencil to do it for the video, and it turned out pretty dang good. Now, I've been quilting for a long time, but I am not as good on the domestic sewing machine as I am on the long arm, and I would be happy with this. So I generally recommend that if you're trying out a stencil for the first time, that you try it on something like this first until you feel like you have it down good enough to do on the actual quilt. Because there's nothing worse than being like, shoot, I've committed to this and I really don't like it. Like, try it out on some scrap fabric first and you're good to go. Blenders or solid fabric works really well because you can see your lines really clearly and you can just learn to get that muscle memory down. But let's take a little closer look at this. So just looking here, you can see that I wasn't perfectly on these lines in many instances. But does this look bad? Absolutely not. This looks really good. And if I would have used thread that matched this fabric exactly, you wouldn't even be able to tell. And once I press this, you are not going to be able to tell that I was off of the lines anyway. Let's look a little bit over here as well. So like this one, for example, I kind of came out of this. I was really on right here where I was supposed to be, but then I just like got off of where I was supposed to be here, and I'm a good 1/4 inch away from where that center is. But you know what? It just looks organic. It looks like I free motion quilted it. Unless you have a quilting machine that is doing it for you, even if you free motion, there's going to be a little bit of variation from piece to piece, and that's totally normal and to be expected. All right, let's get this chalk off and we can see how it looks. So again, with the Ultimate White, you can just put an iron, hot iron over, and the chalk will just go away and it will not come back. It's not like a friction gel pen where it might come back if it's really cold, which by the way has never happened to me, but it is possible. But this way you can just get it to go away, and you can see now it just looks great. We just see the texture of that heart. It looks really good. You can't tell where I was off a little bit. So I'm really happy with this. If I had used like a fuchsia thread to match, you would not be able to see any mistakes at all. You would just see texture, and this is something that I would be really happy with, especially on the domestic, which like I said, I'm not as good at as a long arm, because that's where I spend the majority of my time quilting. So if you spend the majority of your time quilting on your domestic sewing machine, then you too are going to get way more comfortable with that than I am with it, because I only do it for these videos with you guys because I have a long arm. I'm going to use the long arm, and you too will get absolutely fantastic with practice. If you have 2 machines and you can set one up to do free motion quilting and one up to do your regular piecing, then you're going to be more likely to practice, and you can spend 15-20 minutes working on it one day, 2-3 days a week. You're going to become a really good quilter by the time you are done with like just a month of practicing that. You're going to learn a lot and really develop, and this is just so sweet. I love how this turned out. So again, the center is the I Love It stencil. It's just a really easy all over heart meander. They're a good size, maybe about 1.5 inches, 2 inches tall, and it's just a really fast all over stencil. And then the outside is the heart border. It fits in perfectly with 4-inch wide borders, and as you can see, it's really easy to turn the corner with that, and you can always rewatch that video as much as you need to. Now, if you need to learn more about stencils, like how to use your Pounce pad, how to use your stencils, how to get them primed, that's the biggest thing. People are like, oh, it doesn't work. The chalk won't go through. It means you didn't prime it properly. You need to watch our video, but definitely check those things out. We have a completely free 28-part beginner intro to free motion quilting series. It takes you through 4 basic stitches where we start with a stencil like this one, and then I show you how to customize that once you have the muscle memory down, so that way you can continually create a bunch of different looks for your quilts with only mastering 4 stitches. So it's a really great way to do it, and when you're done, you have an actual quilt to show off, and you can reference back to when you're thinking, what am I going to do on my next quilt? So that is a really great series. We've got some kits available to go with that as well. So check all that out over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com, and you can grab a stencil or 2 or 3 or 4. I think we have 4 heart stencils, so you are going to be set for your Valentine's projects. Until next time, happy quilting.